Khayal and Dhrupad are primarily compositional forms and are respectively the main compositional forms used in the genres of Khayal and Dhrupad. There is much scholarly debate about the origins of these two styles. It is generally agreed that Dhrupad is older. Some scholars believe that Khayal has links to forms like the Jombhada, that is also mentioned in the Sangeeta Ratnakara. There are others who argue for a Persian Arabic connection and influence. The very word Khayal is Urdu and suggests Khayal's connections with Persian and Arabic culture. In fact, the word Khayal means idea, imagination, thought, whereas Dhrupada means Dhruvapada, that is fixed or enduring text. So even the very names are suggestive of some very fundamental differences between the two forms. Now, clear textual sources are hard to come by, but especially about the origin of Khayal. But musical lore generally includes three names in the context of a discussion of the origins of Khayal. These are Amir Khusrou, 14th century, and then you have Sultan Hussain Sharki of the 15th century and Niamat Khan, whom we have talked about before, of the 18th century. Now, Amir Khusrou was an inordinately talented man. He was a writer and scholar attached to royal courts of the Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultanate rulers including Alauddin Khilji. He was a prolific poet, a gifted musician, and a dedicated disciple of the Sufi saint Nizamuddin Auliya. So, Amir Khusrou is credited with the creation of Qawwali, among other things. The musical form Qawwali is a musical form that is performed in Sufi dargahs. And such is the legendary status of the man that he is credited with the invention of the tabla, the sitar, as well as the khayal. Scholars, however, find it hard to substantiate these claims. His contribution to khayal and its evolution continue to be debated, especially given the fact that he does not mention the name khayal anywhere in his prolific writings. Now, Sultan Hussain Sharki of Jaunpur was himself a musician and a generous patron of the khayal form, and Niamat Khan Sadarang, as we all know, was a court musician in the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah Rangila's during his reign, and Sadarang's khayal compositions are still performed and are among the oldest available khayal compositions whose authorship is known. So, without going into details of the debate of the origins of khayal, and it is a fascinating debate, it must be said that it remains an unsolved issue. It is also possible that seeking a single origin theory may be fallacious. Musical forms rarely have a single trajectory of evolution. Now, scholars have suggested, and musicians also, there is a tradition of belief that the compositional form and style of presentation of khayal has been influenced by Qawwali and Tappa, which are two other genres of North Indian music. Tappa is characterized by a profusion of fast, very short and sharp melodic runs or tans throughout the composition. The composition itself is studded with tans, very, very intricate and very dense, densely clustered tans. Bola suna jani sayare sanu mande jande e vande And see, Khayal incorporates Tan in its Vistar, as we have seen, and Dhrupad does not. So, it is easy to speculate that Khayal was influenced by Tappa. And as for Qawwali, the use of the text of the song for improvisation and its manner of word and rhythm play are both quite distinctive, and Khayal might have drawn upon these elements in its bol band. Especially, we will see in, especially we saw in the lecture demonstration by Pandit Satyashil Deshpande how Agra Gharana, the way it creates bol band, the way it plays with the words and creates mukhra bandi, that has very close parallels with the Qawwali tradition. So, Qawwali, Tappa, all these musical genres are regarded as having influenced Khayal. But if we were to consider which form of presentation Khayal is closest to, at least today, it would be Dhrupad, not Tappa or Qawwali. So the basic texture of presentation as it moves from very slow and leisurely to fast, from the sparse to the dense, this is like Dhrupad, not Tappa or Qawwali. So what are the main differences between Khayal and Dhrupad? Khayal and Dhrupad differ in the ornaments that are employed. Khayal, we may say, is somewhat more generous with a variety of ornaments used. And again, within schools of Khayal, some schools employ more variety than others. Whereas Dhrupad enters each tonal area and explores it with great intensity. And Khayal, on the other hand, is more vested in melodic phrases. Dhrupad has been deeply impacted by the majestic instrument Been, Rudra Been, while Khayal, especially the prominent school of Kirana Gharana, has been impacted by the sound of the Sarangi. There are, of course, schools of Khayal that have been influenced by Dhrupad and therefore by Been indirectly. Now, Khayal again differs in its what is called Tala Vyavastha, that is, the relation between the text and the Tala, or how the Tala binds the music is different in Khayal. The compositions in Dhrupad are bound in Tal in a different way. And of course, I'm speaking of music of the past 100 years or so for which we have documented music. We have music recordings. Khayal is also different from Dhrupad in its inclusion of tans, as I've said, and all elements of improvisation or vistar are moved into the composition. And the act of filling the avartan and taking the mukhra becomes central to the Khayal presentation. In Dhrupad, alap, which is the most important aspect of vistar, the alap is sung entirely before the composition, and that is quite extensive. And then after that, the composition is rendered, and then bol laya or the rhythmic patterns using the text of the song are performed. So that is the Dhrupad presentation. The song structure of Dhrupad is also different, and in general, the importance that Dhrupad places on the composition is not found in Khayal. Now, overall, it has been argued and it is frequently said that Khayal presents a less rule-bound idiom for musical exploration compared to Dhrupad. Now, what does this mean? What sense can we make of this? There are a few areas where Khayal seems to loosen up as compared to Dhrupad. First, the compositional form of Khayal is very short, just 4 lines, usually running into just 4 avartanas. Dhrupad compositions are generally longer, and traditionally they ran into 4 parts. And Dhrupad as a genre is deeply vested in the composition, in the pada, its textual beauty and integrity. Khayal treats the composition more cursorily. At least some schools definitely don't give the composition itself much importance. Certainly, an attitude of reverence that we find among Dhrupad performers for composition is rarely found among Khayalis. And as I said, in fact, some schools or gharanas of Khayal pay almost no attention to the lyrical aspect of the bandish. The bandish serves merely as a peg to work improvisation around it. Now, with the status of the composition itself somewhat reduced, the stage is set for bringing improvisation to center stage. And so, in this sense, it is more a freer form. I use the word freer advisedly. It is freer in the sense that one particular restraint, some restraints are not there. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. The setting of the composition in Tala is different. Khayal compositions are typically more melismatic. That is, they are not tied down to the matras of the Tal, but they flow between the matras, and the composition itself is fitted into the avartan of the Tal with some degree of freedom and variability. Whereas Dhrupad compositions are more rigorously set in Tal, with the composition tied down to individual matras. Certainly, there is not this kind of the extent of variation that Khayal compositions are subject to, that we don't find in Dhrupad. Laya. In Dhrupad, the laya remains the same throughout the presentation. That is, a composition is rendered at a particular laya, and improvisation in the form of bol bant is performed with various rhythmic variations. There is rhythmic play, definitely, but the laya of the composition is not changed. Whereas in Khayal, in most schools of Khayal, the laya of the tala is increased as the presentation progresses. And this makes for greater variety and excitement, which for the Dhrupad lover could be a sign of decadence. Dhrupad singers often stress that their intention is not to offer excitement and entertainment, and their musical performances are more of an inward journey, almost a spiritual journey. Then we have elements of improvisation. These are alap, bol bant, bol tan, etc. These are woven into the composition, right? Once the composition is rendered, these are performed within the structure of the tal. And there is a lot of freedom regarding how these elements are brought together. So, there is no one template to say that first you sing alap, then you sing bol alap, then you sing bol bant, then tan. No, there is no such thing. Definitely, once the presentation has progressed to some extent, then there is a lot of freedom regarding how these various elements are brought together. Whereas in Dhrupad and also Carnatic music, a certain arrangement of the presentation is expected. So in Dhrupad, as I said, it is alap, then the bandish, then laikari. In Khayal, the bandish is presented and then alap, bol lay, tans, etc. are woven into the presentation according to the school, according to the musical sensibility of the performer, according to the moment. The nature of percussive accompaniment is different. We have seen this earlier in the lesson on tabla. And since the khayal singer does not keep tala in his hand but leaves that to the tabla player, there is another very important kind of freeing up. So, to repeat the point I made earlier, in traditional art music, it is not necessarily a virtue to be freer. Restraints define a musical tradition in an important way. Dhrupad musicians cherish the restraints of their genre just as Khayal musicians cherish theirs, while also celebrating the fact that some of the restraints of Dhrupad are not for them to worry about. And so, one of the very important differences between the two genres is the restraints that they acknowledge, and there are clearly many areas where Khayal does not acknowledge the restraints that Dhrupad does. And while Khayal might celebrate this, Dhrupad might see this as a corruption. So Dhrupad then presents a very different aesthetic and approach to raga presentation from Khayal. Broadly, the Dhrupad genre is regarded as having four main styles, though doubtless there are some others, but the main styles which are called Bani. The Bani is the equivalent of Gharana. So the Bani is a style, and there are four main Banis of Dhrupad, and these are Dagar, Nauhar, Govardhar and Khandahar. And there is a pithy couplet which captures the broad features of these four Banis, and it's this: Zor zor se Khandahar gaave, Madhu bole se Nauhar leve, Saas badi hai Gauhar ki, Ailap chari hai Dagur ki. The poem indicates that the Khandahar Bani became famous due to its voice culture. Zor zor se bole, that is broad and high pitched tones, forceful expression. The Nauhar Bani is famous for its sweet and delicate expression. The Govardhar Bani was known for its deep and sustained breath control. Saas badi hai. And the Dagar Bani developed great expertise in Alapchari, with much attention to the treatment of the swaras. In the next few video modules, Pandit Ritvik Sanyal, who is a noted exponent of Dhrupad and former head of the Department of Music of the Benares Hindu University, will take us through important facets of Dhrupad. Pandit Sanyal is a representative of the Dagar Bani of Dhrupad. In fact, the Dagar Bani of Dhrupad has been the most prominent Bani for the past century or so. So let us enter the world of Dhrupad with Pandit Ritvik Sanyal.